the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world, where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about board games that are dripping with theme.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. When we're pitching a new game to our friends,
when we want to recruit new players to the table,
when we're telling the epic tales of the night before,
we talk about theme.
Do you want to explore this treasure-laden cave with me?
Oh, this? We're just trying to thwart the evil empire until our tiny resistance can take hold.
Last night we killed Hitler.
Theme is what brings you into a game, keeps you engaged, and tells a story as you play.
But a great application of theme should help with justifying mechanisms and remembering phase order.
Ideally, the theme and mechanisms in a board game should support each other.
Property acquiring games contain an auction mechanism.
Train games contain route building.
Murder mystery games have deduction.
But the best games have a theme that envelops the mechanisms in such a way that makes them inseparable and indistinguishable from each other.
In this episode, we're going to look at just some of our favorite board games that are dripping with theme.
I don't think that theme is more important than the mechanisms of the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's a factor. It's a decision that helps in the overall how much you like the game or how interesting you are.
Sure.
But it's not more important than the mechanism.
I think it goes hand in hand, for sure.
Yeah. The story that you're trying to tell comes from the theme. And that's often what we use to attract someone new to a game, right?
Yeah.
And it's what appeals to me too. Like, I'm more interested in a game that has like space battles in it than, a game about buying and selling companies on the stock market.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with stock market games. And if that's what you're into, then that theme really, really appeals to you. And it's about knowing what kind of player is interested in what kind of game.
It used to be Mediterranean trading was the big thing.
Yes, and farming.
But now we're sort of seeing very different themes, like placing people around a table for a photograph.
Yeah.
Or bird watching.
Yeah. I think those are great because the more different kinds of themes that you have in your collection, the more your game collection is going to appeal to a wider audience. The theme is the first thing that catches your eye, right?
It's the hook.
Yeah, it's the hook.
Yeah.
And the mechanisms and the gameplay and how it plays, that's all got to be exciting as well. But the first thing that goes, oh, what's that? Is often the artwork or the pieces and the theme.
And then when we can call upon that theme to help ground the mechanisms.
Yes.
Like, we're going to go to the market and we're each going to choose something for the market. Well, we're drafting, really. And so the shorthand is let's do the market phase. We're all going to the market and getting our merchandise or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And so the theme ends up being that shorthand where you can communicate the different aspects of the game.
Yeah. I agree. If the mechanics and the theme work well together, then, they'll be inseparable and you won't think of the mechanics as the mechanics. It becomes just part of the story.
Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. Dead of Winter is a semi-cooperative, dice-rolling action points, narrative choice, zombie survival game for 3 to 5 players, ages 13 and up. Designed by Jonathan Gilmore and Isaac Vega, Dead of Winter was published by Plaid Hat Games in 2014. Dead of Winter has players leading a small band of survivors during the zombie apocalypse. We're all holed up in the colony. The zombies are just outside, and we are going to have to go out for food, fuel, medicine, and supplies. The zombies are an ever-present threat, as is the weather and, potentially, our fellow survivors. Each player starts with 2 characters they control, selected randomly from a very broad set of potential survivors, 30 in total.
And the characters in this game are, they fit the sort of zombie movie genre really well, right?
Tropes. Yeah.
The tropes, yeah. There's the doctor, there's the mechanic.
Yeah, there's the hunter who's really good, right? At the wilderness survival type stuff. Yeah, they each have their previous occupation, right? Where they came from. There's a mall Santa included, who's quite disheveled and looks like he might have come off a bender.
Yeah, he's a bit of a mess, that mall Santa. And there's even a dog that you can play in that, right?
Yeah, I believe you can't play with the dog right off, but you can acquire the dog later on in the game.
The characters are quite good. I don't think there's a lot of time spent kind of giving them a backstory or anything, but there isn't any need because you feel like you're familiar with them because you've watched so many of these, post-apocalyptic zombie kind of movies before. It's like, oh yeah, I'm playing the character that is like this guy or that guy or this person from that show.
Totally. Each character has some stats like their influence level, their combat strength, and their search value. Some characters are better at killing zombies and some are better at searching. They all have their names along with their occupation, and then some have special abilities. And they all come with a matching standee. Each player is also given a special objective. For example, the desire to live.
That's a big one.
You win the game if all of the following is true. The main objective has been completed. You have at least 1 gun, 1 fuel, 1 medicine, and 1 food in your hand. So you've got this compulsion to make sure you've got one of everything, right? Because you absolutely have to live. And so if you don't have these things at the end of the game, you haven't. You lose. Motivation
is a big thing in these games, right? These post-apocalyptic games. Like you have to have the motivation and the will to want to continue fighting and living. So that's represented with that card for sure.
Another objective is safety, where the colony has to have 4 or more barricades for you to win. So now you're like boarding up the windows at the colony in order to feel safe. And if you don't have 4 of them, you're not going to win. And so people see you. Why are you wasting actions on boarding up the windows? There's no zombies. There's no need for this. What are you doing? You're wasting time. And it makes you look suspicious. And the reason why looking suspicious is a bad thing is because sometimes there's a betrayal objective in the mix.
Yeah.
For example, there's one called Accept Your Fate. In order to win the game, the morale has to be at 0, so everybody has lost. You have at least 2 gun cards equipped on a survivor you control, and you have 3 medicine cards in your hand. So thematically, you've got the guns, and right, you're going to OD on this medicine. You've accepted your fate.
Right.
And so you've got this compulsion in order to complete this objective, in order to win the game, which is contrary to what everybody else is doing. And so these objectives are all shuffled into a small deck. And for a 5-player game, you will take 10 objectives, and only one of them will be a betrayal. So there's a 50% chance that there's a betrayal in the game. And that's an interesting dynamic because now if somebody's boarding up the windows or not offering up food and fuel, you might think that they are planning on burning the place down or whatever. You don't know if
right,
you should,
right? Yeah.
All players start at the colony, the main building. But this little snowed-in town has a few locations that you can travel to in hopes of finding supplies. The school, the library, the police station. You can search the grocery store, which will be a good place to find food, or the gas station if you need to find fuel. At each location is a deck of cards that represent the different things you can find there. So you could go to the hospital in hopes to find medicine, but you might not. There are 7 different types of items that you can find: weapons, fuel, education, food, medicine, tools, or other survivors. The different locations have these different items in different quantities. But this means you could go to the grocery store in search of food and end up finding 2 more survivors and having even more mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And we're going to need supplies. Lots of them. For each round, a new crisis card is introduced, and that will require a certain number of cards to be donated face down to resolve the crisis. If we don't resolve the crisis, bad things happen, and we lose 1 morale. Each of these crisis cards vary in severity, and some of them you might be able to ignore in order to accomplish other things in other areas, because as you know, these types of games are super tight.
Yeah, and your resources might not allow you to stretch them far enough to do every single crisis card.
This mechanism is cruel and it's never ending, but it's a fantastic way to help flush out any potential traitors at the colony.
Yeah.
If at any time players feel as though there is a traitor amongst them, they can vote to have them exiled. Exiled players will receive an exiled card which will modify their current objective, usually a twinge of revenge in there.
Okay.
The card has 2 conditions depending on if you're the traitor or not. You no longer get to vote in colony issues, and the food and crisis card requirements are a bit lower. Dead of Winter is a dice-rolling action point game, meaning players roll dice at the beginning of their turns, depending on how many characters they control at the time, and use those dice to take actions. You're mostly spending the dice to kill zombies or search locations, but they can be used for a character's ability or even just to take out some trash.
Taking out the trash is an important part of the apocalypse. You've got to make sure the place is tidy, because
hey, if you don't take out the trash, the garbage piles up. It's actually a mechanism in the game, and morale can go down. It could even cause you to lose the game.
The garbage is a morale booster. I love it.
Each game of Dead of Winter starts with picking a main objective card. This is the game's scenario. It will decide the game's length and difficulty. There will be a specific mission the players need to complete in the rounds provided. Each card references a different paragraph of flavor text in the rulebook.
So each round, players are putting out crises, but each game is enveloped in an even bigger crisis?
Yeah, it's just bad news after bad news. The real hook to Dead of Winter is in the title. It's the Crossroads cards. There is a deck of 80 different Crossroads cards, and on every player's turn, the player to the right will draw and read to themselves the top card from the Crossroads deck. Each card will contain some text at the top, and if the active player ever meets all the requirements of the trigger text, then the player to the right immediately interrupts the game and reads the Crossroads card aloud to the table. And quite often these cards are, hey, we've never explored that building before, or did you hear that sound? Or there's a stranger that is approaching. And then the group is given a choice. Do we go inside? Do we explore the sound? Do we talk to the stranger? And once the group has voted with either a thumb up or a thumb down, we read the corresponding text to find out the results of our decision.
Right. And the group has to decide this.
Mm-hmm. There's also quite a few moral dilemmas that will crop up. That you'll have to maybe help somebody, and then you might not have enough food otherwise. And then you're making these really quite dark decisions. Because there's 80 cards, and you're not triggering a card on every round. The player to the right is going to draw a card, but they might not read it.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a very wide variety of these encounters on every game, because you're not getting an encounter every turn. And it can be quite jarring too, because you're playing the game and you're trying to decide, well, if I go here, I can get the fuel we need to solve this crisis, and then I'll still have a few more turns to come back here. And you go to make your turn, and then the player to the right goes, you hear a sound, and they just interrupt. Says, well, like what? What's happening?
Right.
And you just stop and do this sort of morbid thought experiment of would you rather. And it can have a really unsettling effect sometimes, because you have your plan and you're going about your business, and then oh wait, don't forget, you're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse.
Right, right.
It just pulls you right back into that theme.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find yourself deliberately abstracting the gameplay elements just so you can make cold-hearted decisions based on pure survival.
Yeah.
We can't talk about Dead of Winter without talking about the exposure die. So every time that you are traveling from the colony to one of these other locations, or from one of these other locations to another location, you have to roll this dreaded 12-sided die.
Right.
And there are lots of blank faces on the die, but quite often you're going to get a wound, and after so many wounds, your character will die. Or you're going to get frostbite, and the frostbite turns into a wound and then gives you more frostbite, and eventually you'll die. Or on one of the 12 faces is a bite, where you've been bitten by a zombie and now you're infected with the virus, and you have a choice to try to fight it or to die. And it's a difficult decision, because if you try to fight it and you fail, then that character dies, and the next character in influence order, going from bottom up, gets infected. And again, you were given that same decision. Do we want to kill that character or try to fight the virus? And if we fight the virus and fail, that character dies, and then the next character becomes infected. And it could just tear through the colony if you want to, if you don't want to make that sacrifice, if you want to say, hey, we're going to get lucky, we're going to fight this off, it could just tear through the whole colony, just decimate. Every time a character dies, you lose morale.
Right.
And there's not a lot of morale to go around. If it ever hits 0, you're done.
Right.
A player can lose all the characters they're controlling. The amount of characters they control can go up and down. You can find other survivors. Now you're controlling 3 characters or 4 characters, but then they can die and you can just be controlling 1.
Right.
If at any time you're controlling none, then you reach into the box, you grab another one, and you start over. All the supplies that you are carrying get dumped. If you were at the gas station, the cards you were carrying get shuffled into the gas station deck. You have to go back to the gas station and rifle through them if you want to find that special sniper rifle you really liked.
Now, Dead of Winter is, for some people, for a lot of people, the sort of the best of the zombie games. We've all played a lot of zombie games recently, and we've all watched a lot of Walking Dead and other similar movies.
Yeah.
So there might be a group of people who haven't played Dead of Winter and are maybe a little zombie exhausted or zombie fatigued.
Sure.
Definitely worth playing. Like, it's a good one.
It's a good one. The zombies, I find, become abstracted, and they are the noise in the background. Not to say that the zombie theme isn't coming through.
Right.
But the real challenge is the other players and what their objectives are, and trying to figure out if they're in line with yours, trying to get everybody to cooperate. We all have this big problem. Can we work together in order to solve it? Can we work together efficiently in order to solve it?
Right.
Not unlike the Walking Dead comic book.
Chronicles of Crime. Chronicles of Crime is a cooperative murder mystery deduction game for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 and up. Published in 2018 by Lucky Duck Games, Chronicles of Crime takes about an hour to an hour and a half to play and was designed by David Sickerell. In Chronicles of Crime, players are detectives investigating a crime, presented with a crime scene, a few leads, and an open world to explore. We must work together to find and interrogate suspects, chase down leads, consult forensic experts, and find the culprit. To begin, Chronicles of Crime requires you to download the free app onto your phone or tablet before playing. It will be used to examine the crime scene in a virtual 3D world, allowing players to look 360 degrees around the crime scene.
This is like VR. It's not an augmented reality. You put the phone up to your face and you can look around the entire crime scene. It's completely 360. You're standing in one spot.
Yeah.
But it's 360 degrees. You turn your face around the room and you can see the body. And
yeah. There is a glasses option that you can buy. It doesn't come with the base game.
Right.
That allows you to put your phone into the glasses, and it acts a bit more like a VR glasses. But I've heard from people who have it that it doesn't work well, and it's not necessary. It's not
necessary, yeah.
You hold your phone, or if you've got a tablet, because it's a little bit bigger, it might be a little bit more interesting that way. You hold your phone up to your face, and you sitting in your room in front of your table, but you can spin around, look up, look down at your feet, and you see yourself in the crime scene. Like you see the body or the evidence is sitting there in front of you, and you actually spin around, and you have a certain amount of time that you have to do that to examine the crime scene, but you can always spend more time to look at it. The app is also used to look for clues or items found at the scene. So you might see like papers or a briefcase or a weapon, and you use the app to interrogate suspects by scanning the unique QR code on every card in the game.
A QR code is a type of barcode in the shape of a square that can be scanned and read by a digital device, such as a phone, and can provide information quickly and easily.
As we're investigating the crime, we have to work together and decide together which locations to travel to. Should we go to the victim's home or to his workplace? Who do we talk to? Should we ask the boyfriend about the bloody hammer, or should we talk to our forensic analyst about the body? Each location, character, and item in the game has its own card with its own QR code on it. Scanning the QR code will bring up the person you want to talk to and allow you to ask them questions about specific items or other characters in the story.
This is so good in that you don't know where to go. You've been given some evidence, and then the world is open to you. Do you talk to the boyfriend? Do you question the bodyguard? Do you go to their workplace, or do you go to their home? Of course, there's these little crumbs, these little hints that you can maybe pick up and follow, but if you miss those...
Yeah, it's really open of what you can do.
Yeah, it is very open. It's like almost intimidating to the point where you know, is this the right choice that I'm making? But then once you start to, explore, you get these threads.
Yeah. Yeah. And time is a factor, right? Because throughout the game, you're getting updates on, what the forensic team might be doing, or your boss is calling and saying, there's been another crime.
Yeah.
and the time is ticking.
Yeah. Time is a factor.
When you think you know how the crime was committed, by whom, and their motive, you can stop the game and present your case to your bosses. At that time, the app will tell you the solution to the scenario and provide you with a score for how well you did.
Nice.
Sherry and I love the crime dramas from the BBC. We always say that BBC does crime shows better than anyone else in the world.
Oh, agreed.
Our favorite shows like Broadchurch, Line of Duty, The Fall, Sherlock, Traces. There's just so many. The list is endless. We had a friend tell us about Chronicles of Crime and, the idea that you can examine the crime scene in virtual world.
Yeah.
And I was just like, we have to get this game. We have to jump on it right now. That 360-degree nature of it is really the selling feature of this. Mm-hmm. It really puts you in this immersive world, right? Like you feel like you're literally looking for clues at this crime scene.
People might argue that it brings a video game element to the board game, but it's more of a Where's Waldo mechanism in that it's a still image that you're looking at and looking at the so it does still feel very board gamey, and there's no dexterity element.
There's no hand-eye coordination required for working this app.
Exactly. Yeah. There's not Space Invaders or something. Mm-hmm. So it still feels very, very board gaming and integrates well into the board game. It doesn't feel like a sore thumb.
No, it feels very much like a board game with this sort of 3D image in the middle of it. When you hold up your phone or tablet to your face, you're looking for blood splatters. You're looking for a weapon. Is the body face down or face up? Are there clothes around? Is there money around? You're looking for a cause of death. There might be a briefcase on the floor or money sticking out of the victim pocket, that sort of thing. Now, each time you look at the crime scene, it takes up some time in the game, and players can each take turns examining the scene. But every time you do, that costs more time, and that can add to how well you're doing in the game.
So you've got these VR goggles to your head or the phone up to your face, and you're looking around the crime scene, and then you're calling out the different things. Did you see? I see blood splatter. There's a broken cell phone on the ground. Yeah. There are bullet casings and these sorts of things. And as you call them out, you say, oh, I see this, I see that. your teammates are rifling through the deck and finding the card that says bullet casings and finding the card that says cell phone and putting them on the table and creating a tableau of evidence that you have for that crime scene. And this is how you use the evidence to take it to the forensics guy or whatever. Each of these cards have a barcode on them.
Right. All these cards get pulled out. And now we've got this sort of list of evidence that we put up on this fantastic board that's like one of those giant whiteboards that you see in these crime movies.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, well, who do we want to talk to about the blood splatters? And should we ask the bouncer about the briefcase or the money that we found or that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. It works really, really well.
Right. So if you want to talk to the bouncer about the briefcase, then you scan the bouncer and then scan the briefcase.
Yeah. Or you might say we have to send the weapon to the forensic team for analysis and see if they can pick up fingerprints or something like that, or identify how the body, the victim was killed or something like that. Each of the decisions in Chronicles of Crime feels important.
Yeah.
You want to ask everyone you meet in the game about every other character and the suspects that you have and get all the information, because you just never know which piece of information will lead to another clue and another line of questions. And it's very easy in this game to get misled.
Yeah.
Like all of the crime TV shows and movies that we all watch, there's always this sort of little hint that, oh, they're really trying to make it look like it was the husband.
Yeah.
And it ends up being the brother or something like that that did the crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There'll be a few red herrings that you have to eliminate before you can be confident you've got the right answer.
Yeah. And each decision that you make in the game takes time, and this is going to affect your overall score. So if we decide, okay, we've already talked to the bouncer, but now we have some new evidence or a new item or a new crime scene, let's go back and talk to the bouncer again about this new suspect or this new item. That's going to take more time and affect our overall score, or it may affect our overall score.
So when I play these games like Unlock or the Exit series, I don't play with it. I mean, the timer's going, but I just completely disregard the timer. I like to take my time. I like to explore all the options.
Yeah.
I find the timer to be an added stress that doesn't make the game better for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, sometimes the timer, it's a hard 2 minutes and you've got to make a decision kind of thing. Not in Chronicles of Crime, though. I mean, from the scenarios that I've played, you can take as much time as you need. It's just going to affect your score. And that's what I like to do. I like to just, let's talk to everyone about everything and get as much information as we can, because this is a game that you really only play through once, right? I mean, it's not one that you're going to play again. So if you decide to be that detective who is close to retirement and doesn't really give a damn anymore, you're going to half-ass your way through the questions. You can do that. That's totally a legitimate way to play it. And you might, stumble across the culprit and their motive, but you may miss out on some of the fun of the game. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like it's my responsibility to get the facts correct. Just like that, that crime show trope. It's like, we need to catch the right person.
We're not going to put an innocent man behind bars.
Exactly. Let's get this right. Let's do it right. Somewhere in the middle of each scenario we've played, it seems like everyone is a suspect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no one that is clear. They all seem guilty. They all have some sort of motivation. And, I feel like we're just going to be throwing a guess.
Yeah.
I think this is where Chronicles of Crime and the theme for it really comes through, because it feels like you're really launching this investigation and that you have an obligation to the victim to find out what was done and why. It just feels really important at some point in the game. It's like, okay, this is not a game anymore. We have to solve this. When we started playing Chronicles of Crime, we loved it. And just like, a great TV show or movie, we were like, sometimes it would be better shared with another person. So we made sure that we could save one of the scenarios to play with our friend Beth, who is a big fan of all those CSI shows and watched all, CSI Miami and CSI Kandahar and CSI Toronto. I don't know. There were so many of those shows. But anyway, we knew that she would like this game, so we made sure that we did it. And that's part of the fun of this game, is working with a group, right? It just seems more fun to play it with a group of people. You really feel like you're inside one of those shows. And the best part is when one of your fellow investigators actually disagree with you. And you'll find yourselves, having these discussions around the table. It's like, well, why do you think that? There's no evidence at all that she did it. Or you might say, like, I think we should go back and talk to the wife again. She seemed scared about something. Like, she seemed like she was holding back some information.
Yeah.
Or you just think he's guilty because he kind of looks guilty. Like, each card has this little image and it's like, well, that guy looked guilty. I think it's him. Or you might say he's the only one who would benefit from the victim being dead. And these are all lines that you would hear in these shows. So here we are disagreeing with each other, going, no, there's still the evidence doesn't line up. Like, why would he do that? Just because of this? There's no promotion, there's no money in it. Why would he do it?
Where's the motive?
Exactly. And to me, that's when Chronicles of Crime and the theme really starts to explode. It's nothing that we're doing in the game. It's not the QR codes. It's not the board. It's not, this timer. It's us talking about the information that we've gathered.
Yeah.
That's what makes Chronicles of Crime a great thematic game. In some ways, it's kind of a sandbox game. In it, you get to decide everything that you get to do. You decide who you talk to. You could decide how your character is. You can be that hard-nosed detective going through, the job, doing a thorough job, asking all the hard questions. Or you can half-ass the interrogations and use your intuition and just make a quick decision and hope that you're right.
A sandbox game is a term used to describe a type of game where players are not constrained by certain actions or goals, given minimal limitations, and are provided freedom to explore and interact with the game at their own pace.
The base game for Chronicles of Crime comes with 1 tutorial and 5 scenarios to solve. There are also some downloadable cases that you can pay a tiny bit more to get more out of your game. You get a bunch more cases for a few extra bucks. And there's also these full expansions that take place in different times, so that you might be asked to solve a crime in 15th century France or solve a crime in the distant future where cybernetic implants and artificial intelligence play a major role in everyday life. Now, I haven't played any of these expansions yet. Have you, Matt?
No, just the base game.
I'm sure that I will eventually play them, and I'm sure I will like them because the base game is done so fantastically.
Yeah.
Regardless of what timeline they put them in, I just hope that they continue to pump out more and more content for this game because it's one that I love, and we still have one scenario that we haven't done from the base game. And it's kind of like saving that last season of your favorite show. Yeah. We're just waiting. Yeah. Like, I don't want to play it just yet because then it's over. What are we going to do after that? Well, in this case, we'll be buying the expansions, I guess. Yeah.
Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is an area influence, area movement, dice rolling cat and mouse game, completely entrenched in the original Star Wars trilogy. Rebellion was designed by Corey Konieczka and published by Fantasy Flight in 2016. It's designed for 2 or 4 players ages 14 and up and plays in about 2.5 to 4 hours. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire.
I'm excited about this one because I'm a fan of all 3 Star Wars movies. But anyway, I've never played this game, and I'm so excited because it's one that I've wanted to try for a really long time, but somehow missed it.
You're going to love it. In Star Wars Rebellion, it's the Empire versus the Rebels in this intergalactic game of cat and mouse. Hidden away on their unknown planet is the Rebel base from which the Rebels launch their attacks against the evil Empire. With each successful attack, the Rebels bring the game closer to an end. If they can stay hidden until the end of the game, they will spark a full-on revolution and win the game. It won't be easy with the Empire hunting them down with a full arsenal of assault carriers, TIE fighters, AT-STs and AT-ATs, stormtroopers and star destroyers, or potentially a Death Star or 2.
Wow.
The Rebels have their X-Wings and Y-Wings and their air speeders, Rebel transports, Carillion corvettes, and Mon Calamari cruisers. The rebels can even put ion cannons and shield generators on the planets for some extra protection.
Cool.
Space is massive, so Star Wars Rebellion is played over 2 full-sized boards. It depicts a galaxy with 30 different planets across 8 different sectors of space. Some of these planets are under Imperial control, like Coruscant, while other planets are under Rebel control, like Mon Calamari. At the beginning of the game, the Rebel player chooses a planet to hide the Rebel base. Then they find the matching card from the probe deck, which is made up of 1 card of each planet on the board. During the game, the Imperial player can draw a card from the probe deck to learn definitively where the Rebels aren't hiding. Thematically, this represents a probe droid landing on a planet and confirming that there are no rebels there. Sorry?
I want to be able to do that impersonation here, but...
Sorry, how does the probe droid go? Of the 30 planets on the board at the start of the game, some will be under Rebel influence, while others will be under Imperial influence, and some will be neutral. Controlling these planets becomes very important, as they give you resources to go towards constructing troops and fleets. The more planets you control, the more troops and fleets you can make.
Yeah.
At the start of the game, each side is controlling 4 leaders. The rebels start with Princess Leia and 3 generals, and the Imperial player starts with Darth Vader, the Emperor, General Tarkin, and General Tag. Throughout the game, it's possible to bring out more leaders, like Wedge Antilles, Lando Calrissian, Boba Fett, or Admiral Piet. These leaders are used to play mission cards. Each mission will require certain things from its leaders, which means certain leaders will be needed to do certain missions, or some missions will require more than one leader. The Imperial player might play Imperial Propaganda in an attempt to influence or control neighboring systems of an Imperial-controlled planet. They could play long-range probe on any system, and if successful, the Rebel player must tell the Imperial player if the Rebel base is in that system. There's a mission card that allows the Imperial player to construct a Death Star. In fact, if the conditions are right, the Imperial player could construct 2 Death Stars.
I love the idea that there can be 2 Death Stars. Like, I feel like I've never played Star Wars Rebellion, but I feel like that's like my first order of business of what I got to do when I play it. It just sounds so amazing. 2 Death Stars. I want that.
The Rebel player missions are different. With fewer troops and less ships, the Rebels are performing sneak attacks and sabotage missions. The Rebel player also has objective cards. They come in 3 different tiers and roll out throughout the game. These objectives, like destroying a Star Destroyer or blowing up the Death Star, if completed, will move the game end tracker down the round track, closer to the round tracker, speeding up the end of the game. Thematically, this is winning over support for the Rebellion. If the round tracker and the end tracker meet before the Empire was able to destroy the Rebel base, the Rebels win. But given enough time, the Empire will find the Rebels, and the Rebels are unlikely to survive a full-scale assault. So these objectives are crucial for the Rebels' survival.
Yeah.
So in a typical turn, the Rebels will start and choose missions. They place their cards face down on the table and assign leaders to them. Some missions can be blocked, and in order to block your opponent's mission, you will need to have free leaders unassigned. If you don't have a leader to defend against your opponent's mission, it will go uncontested and be successful. Leaders are also used to move fleets and troops. On their turn, players will place a leader in a system and then move as many units from adjacent systems into that system. If the Rebels and Imperials ever have units in the same system, combat occurs. Combat can be a little fiddly and sometimes slows the game down, but it's resolved with dice, and each unit will give you a certain number of dice to roll. There are also tactics cards, which you can play, that will give you some tactical advantages. So play goes back and forth like this, each player trying to complete missions, taking over systems, spreading influence. The Imperial player is hunting the rebels, and the rebels are trying to stay hidden while performing special attacks from their hidden rebel base.
Thematically, is what's happening the rebels are trying to influence rebellion?
Yeah. That's represented by those objective cards. So when you are able to perform a sneak attack and your entire fleet shows up in one sector, and we all the ships attack a Star Destroyer, for example, or maybe there's a Super Star Destroyer in the game, and we're able to destroy the Super Star Destroyer. What happens is the rest of the galaxy sees that happening and goes, hey, well, it looks like the rebels got a thing going on here. And you're kind of winning over support. And that's what's causing you to move the round tracker down.
Right.
And so, yeah, that thematically is that you're recruiting, you're getting
support.
You're winning over favor. Different planets are falling out of the Empire's grasp. The mission cards are where this game really shines. The Rebel player can find Luke Skywalker and then send him to get trained as a Jedi. But the Rebel player could just as easily train Leia to be the Jedi.
That's very cool.
The Imperial player can kidnap leaders and try to convert them to the dark side.
Wow.
The missions vary, making each game of Rebellion different, depending on the player's style and the cards available at the time.
That's very cool. I love that you can train Leia to be the Jedi instead of Luke this time.
Yeah.
Sort of rewriting the plot of the movies. That's awesome. I love that.
Star Wars Rebellion is very asymmetrical. The Imperial player is greatly overpowered compared to the Rebel player, and the Rebel player's only advantage is that they are hidden. This makes for an incredibly tense game. My first play of this game was 5 hours. Now, that included the teach and the rulebook consulting. It was the first play after all.
Right.
But that entire time, we were on the very edge of our seats.
Cool. This is one that I've never played, and I don't understand why. Like, I'm a Star Wars fan, I'm a board game fan. This one is highly ranked. You know, fans of Star Wars love it. It's one that I really, really need to play.
It's hard to get to the table because it works best at 2 players, and it takes so long to play.
Okay.
It's one of those event games.
Like, I suspect that the 5 hours is probably why I've not played it.
Right.
But I definitely have to give it a try. It sounds amazing. I love that there's so much flexibility in the story as it unfolds. All those different options really gets me excited as a Star Wars fan. And
now, it's important to keep in mind that not every game of Star Wars Rebellion is 5 hours long.
Right.
My most recent play of this game was quite a bit less than that. I was the Empire, and I was able to deduce where the Rebellion had hidden their base. And the Rebel player didn't know that I'd figured this out. And I had a few turns to build a Death Star, and I built it in the quadrant right next to where I knew the base was. So by the time the Death Star was ready to go, I just had to move it one space over.
Right.
And then play the mission card, fire the big laser.
Kaboom.
Which in itself is a huge, it's an event, right?
Yeah.
You reach into the box and you pull out this large black disc that is filled with debris like a asteroid field, and you place it over top of the planet that you destroyed. So it's no longer there. The name of the planet is obliterated. Everything is just now empty space.
It's rubble.
And I turned to my opponent and I said, was that the Rebel base? And that's how that game came to a swift but very exciting conclusion.
Boom. Then you've won.
Somehow it doesn't feel punishing to end the game like that, to lose like that, because it's so spectacular. The conditions had to be just right.
Yeah.
There is that tug of war, right? You want to expand your armies and get, influence so that you can get more ships, so you can search more planets. But at the same time, you need to search the planets, and find the rebel before the game ends. They could be pinging you off. A single X-Wing can destroy the Death Star.
Just like the movie.
Just like the movie. And if you don't have enough TIE fighters to protect your Death Star, it's very vulnerable from attack. And if the rebels are able to destroy it, they move that round tracker like 3 places. It just like speeds up the game so fast. So it is a very thematic and immersive kind of Star Wars experience. I've heard people complain that it's not thematic because it is just these elements of the movie reorganized in a random way. Oh, now Leia's the Jedi. Oh, now Luke did get turned to the dark side. But those are the elements that we're familiar with, and we are the ones controlling those elements. So I find it very thematic. I get to decide who gets trained as the Jedi,
right,
and when and where that will happen.
Your game might end up being like the movies, but it might also end up the alternate universe of Star Wars where Leia is the one that's the Jedi or something like that.
Yeah, it is very familiar while also giving you agency over your decisions.
Yeah, I got to play that. That sounds fantastic.
You're going to love it.
Black Orchestra. Black Orchestra is a dice-rolling set collection cooperative game for 1 to 5 players set in World War II. Designed by Philip Dubarry and published in 2016 by Game Salute, Black Orchestra can be played in about 90 minutes and is recommended for ages 14 and up. It's 1939 Germany. Players are members of the German military, business, and intelligence communities who are motivated to change their country's leadership. Players are sowing dissent, working up the courage to go against the regime, and putting in place the items and plans to kill Hitler. There is only one way for the group of conspirators to win Black Orchestra. That is by changing the course of history and actually killing Hitler. This is done by enacting one of the plot cards and rolling the right combination of symbols on the many custom dice in the game. Everyone loses if everyone is sent to prison at the same time, the event deck runs out, or a certain card comes out at the very end of the game that sends all conspirators to prison. Players are balancing several things while playing. They are gathering items and plot cards with different opportunities to possibly assassinate Hitler. Players roll dice to conspire, stir up dissent, and recruit people to the cause. Depending on what is rolled, this may raise your suspicion level and increase the risk of getting caught. But causing this dissent will make it easier to succeed. Visiting locations where atrocities are committed will increase your motivation for conspiracy and help you succeed. There will be times when players need to pick up items and deliver them to certain locations to reduce their suspicion and gain a benefit that will help them. Each plot card has a scenario of required elements. For example, you might need to be in the same location as Hitler and have a specific item like a gun. But they will also have optional elements that will help, like a badge or explosives. These will help you succeed if you have them. Hitler's military support track will make it harder for conspirators to succeed with plot cards, requiring them to have better luck while rolling. Successfully plotting against Hitler involves timing and luck. You will have to watch as Hitler moves around the map and pay attention to his support from the military, plan to be in the right place with the right card, and roll the right number of symbols on the dice to be successful. The event cards are shuffled in 7 different decks, and this is where the story of World War II is told pretty much in the order that things actually happened in real life. Bad things happen when players are arrested as they have to resist interrogation. Failing to resist interrogation always results in bad things happening and making it harder for the group to succeed. The mechanics in Black Orchestra, they don't really match what you're doing in the game.
Yeah.
There's no plotting and scheming. We're not, secretly making decisions. Mm-hmm. It's mostly a game about rolling dice and playing cards. However, somehow the theme really shines through in this game because the mechanisms don't really get in the way of the story that's being told.
For sure.
I also think there's this emotional element to what you're doing, like this idea that we're going to change history and, it being based on, actual events that help the theme come through.
When you're playing the game, you're looking at a map of 1939 Germany.
Yeah.
And there are locations on that map that are marked that are real places.
The map is a map of Germany and Eastern Europe with a sort of close-up of elements of Berlin. And, you have to unlock parts of the map as the game goes on. As the war proceeds, you can travel farther and farther to, different countries that are now being controlled by Germany and see what's actually happening there. And that causes the players to believe stronger in their cause and their motivation.
Conviction goes up, right?
Yeah, their conviction to do this thing goes up.
Yeah.
It's a hard game to win. Players really, really have to work together. When you do win, you feel like you've really accomplished something.
Oh, for sure.
But it's not an easy game to win, that's for sure. You have to be prepared to lose several times.
And the plots are based on actual plots to assassinate Hitler.
Yeah.
They were failed attempts in history, and this is our chance to go back.
Yeah, the plots are real attempts that didn't succeed, so it should be hard, right?
Yeah.
There's even this sort of neat matrix or table, which is, sad and sobering at the same time, that it's at the back of the rule book, and it estimates how many lives that might have been saved during the war, depending on what stage of the game that you actually succeeded. So like if you succeeded in stage 3, you saved, say 36 million lives. And if you succeeded in stage 7, you saved 12 million lives or something like that. Like that's the real world consequences that are represented in this game.
It's very sobering to take a minute and think about that in the middle of game night.
Yeah. Because of that, the game isn't for everyone. It's a deeply disturbing part of our history.
Yeah.
And it's still a very personal issue to a great many people, even now, decades after the war. And unfortunately, most of the problems that were faced by humanity in 1939, they still exist today.
That's very true.
And, lots of portions of our world are facing these things right now. But, there's always been this fascination with what might have happened if Hitler had been stopped or assassinated earlier in the war. You'll see this in science fiction shows. I know Doctor Who did a Let's Kill Hitler episode. But I always feel like with Black Orchestra, the aim of the game is to kill Hitler.
Yeah.
But it always feels to me that the game is trying to invoke this deeper conversation with its players about the war and how things could have been different, and relating it back to, where we are as a society today.
What I like about Black Orchestra is that we are Germans in Germany trying to stop Hitler.
Yeah.
If you were to hold up a board game and say, hey, do you want to try to assassinate Hitler with me? I would assume that we are Allied troops with our forces on the border trying to decimate the German forces in order to get to... But that's not what this game is at all.
Right.
This is about the internal political and moral struggle of the country in a really heinous time in history.
Yeah, exactly. And the characters are real people who really did try to plot against Hitler. Some of them had tried with various levels of success to try and kill him, all of which failed. And each of the player cards comes with a description about that character, that real person in history, and what they did and how their plot didn't succeed and what happened.
Perhaps there's an important discussion to be had about playing board games based on historical events. But I do appreciate learning about these important figures in history that we wouldn't have learned about otherwise.
Yeah. And every time I play this game with someone who hasn't played it before, it stirs up these, sobering emotions about the atrocities committed. Also about how important the lessons learned during World War II about humanity, about aggression and power and racism and hate. And we have to keep these lessons in the forefront of our minds even today. And everybody that I've played it with, they leave the table saying that I want to go and learn more about this person, my character, or that character, or this plot. And, I don't know if they actually do go to the library and read some books.
Library, that's cute.
Or they watched that Tom Cruise movie, but nerd. But I appreciate that part of the game is that everyone leaves the table with this discussion, this, set of emotional experiences that makes you think really deeply about where we are as a world, where we are as a culture and humanity, and a longing to learn more. That there's not many games that provide this kind of experience. And that's all brought through the theme of Black Orchestra.
Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Flashpoint Fire Rescue is a cooperative firefighting pick-up and deliver game for 2 to 6 players, published in 2011 by Indie Boards and Cards, and designed by Kevin Lansing. Flashpoint Fire Rescue can be played in 45 minutes and is recommended for ages 10 and up. Flashpoint Fire Rescue puts players in the hot seat as firefighters responding to a huge house fire, hoping to rescue as many people as possible from the dangerous inferno. The board is a top view of this 6-room structure surrounded by street. At the beginning of the game, it's randomly populated by people, pets, potentially hazardous material, and of course, fire. Lots of fire. Each of these things are tokens on the board. The people, pets, and potentially hazardous materials are all upside down, so you don't know where they are. You have to explore the house to find these tokens and flip them over to be sure.
And actually, some of them can be blank on the other side. And that's representing like there's smoke and, the chaos of the fire that the fireman thinks there's something over there and they get there and, it's not a person or a pet that's lying on the floor. Maybe it's just clothes or something. Some of those tokens are blank.
You can futz with the numbers of these tokens to make the game more or less challenging, which is ideal when introducing kids to the game.
Yeah.
Each player has a certain number of action points to spend depending on their character, but it's usually 4. These are spent on moving.
1 action point.
Moving to a space with fire.
2 action points.
Carrying a victim.
2 action points.
Removing smoke.
1 action point.
And removing fire.
2 action points.
Once all the firefighters have spent all their action points, then the fire spreads. If the fire spreads to where there are hazardous materials, those hazardous materials will explode, spreading fire even further. The fire gets a turn, then the firefighters get a turn.
There's even a fire truck and an ambulance that players can get into and drive around the building to make it easier to bring victims to care. Or fire the big water cannon on the fire truck to put out, some of the fires in a certain quadrant of the house. That's very cool.
That's right. Yeah. It was a terrific way to put out some fire. Yeah. Love that fire truck. The firefighters win if they can rescue 7 or more people from the fire. But there are so many ways to lose. The house could become so engulfed with fire that there is no longer any fire tokens to add. If we run out of damage cubes, then the house collapses. If 4 people die, then everyone loses together. Sometimes these co-op games can feel like a big puzzle. And I'm not going to say that this one isn't like that. But I find that the puzzle you're trying to solve and the way that the fire moves really help ground this game into its theme. This game is a good example of how the theme can help you remember the phase order. Fire spreads. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I play this game a lot and I love it. And it's always a great experience. But I think one of my favorite stories about the game is actually one that I didn't have. It's one that I read online, and it was probably on BGG or somewhere. But it was about this guy who was playing with his son. He was probably 7 or 8 years old, and the story came with a picture of his son with this huge smile, this big grin on his face, and he's dressed up in a complete authentic looking fireman's costume. He's got the fireman's helmet. He's got the jacket. I think he even had like an axe in his hand or something like that. Awesome. Like he's totally dressed up, and you can see the board is there beside them, beside the kid or just in front of him when the picture is being taken. And he said that, when they had rescued the 7 people or however many people they were required to win the game, they were excited. They were happy. Yay, we won the game. We rescued the people. And the son instantly asked, he said, can we keep going and save the rest?
Yeah.
Because that's what it says in the rule book. You saved the 7 people. The game's over. We won. Yay, everybody, we saved it. But this kid just absorbed, he's very young. Like he was definitely younger than the age recommendation on the box. He instantly understood the theme and was like, no, there's still people in there. We have to keep going and try and save them. And I just thought that was a real eye opener for me. It was like, okay, I love this game. I love how the theme matches it and how it's so approachable. But here's this little kid that was doing something in the game that I had never done and I'd never even thought about. So now whenever we play, it's always like, okay, we won. I think we should all just see, do we have time to go in and try and save the last 3 people or whoever we think is. Let's get the rest of those people out of there.
Yeah.
If the building collapses at that point, we just say, well, we won, but we didn't get them all out.
We lost a few good men.
We lost a few good men, yeah. It's an amazing game for the way it brings that theme.
We're going to get back to the show after a brief message. This next ad is for Chris's own company, Geeky Goodies. If you'd like to hear what an ad for your game, product, or website might sound like, drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. When we escape into board games, we're always wearing our Geeky Goodies t-shirts.
They are great conversation starters for gamers and non-gamers.
But did you know that they also sell masks, socks, hoodies, game room posters, mugs, and so much more?
All things board games.
All things geeky.
Visit geekygoodies.com and use coupon code ESCAPE for a 10% discount off your purchase. Battlestar Galactica, the board game. Battlestar Galactica, the board game, is a semi-cooperative game of mistrust and intrigue, with voting, bluffing, hidden roles, and a traitor mechanism that is based on the reimagined, widely acclaimed sci-fi channel series of the 2000s. Published by Fantasy Flight Games in 2008, Battlestar can be played with 3 to 6 players ages 14 and up, and takes about 5 hours to play. After the treacherous attack on the homeworld by sentient, self-aware cybernetic beings that look exactly like humans, called Cylons, the small remnants of humanity are on the run, searching for a new home and constantly fleeing from further Cylon attacks. As the Cylons pursue humanity's destruction, the biggest threat comes from within. In every game, 1 or more players secretly side with the Cylons and are working against the group, sabotaging the ship and destroying the precious remains of humanity's resources of food, fuel, morale, and population.
I am a huge fan of the greatest television show of all time.
It really is.
Yeah. But I've never played Battlestar Galactica, the board game. Does someone need to be a fan of the TV show in order to enjoy the game?
It certainly helps if you've watched the show. I think you would really enjoy the game.
Yeah.
But if someone hadn't watched the show and they played the game, I still think that there's enough there that as long as you explain the theme and what a Cylon is and a little bit of the background, which, doesn't take that long, I think they would totally enjoy the game. The game mechanics are fun. It's, the original sort of trader game. The theme's important, obviously, as part of the appeal to the game, but it certainly you don't need to be a fan of the show to enjoy it. At the beginning of the game, players are dealt a loyalty card that tells them if they are on the human side or secretly on the Cylon side. Everyone keeps these secret. During the game, players collect skill cards in 5 different colors representing politics, leadership, tactics, piloting, and engineering. And they use them to determine the political and military leaders of the ship, send someone to the brig, fend off Cylon ships, and keep Galactica working and moving forward. A lot of intrigue comes from, and really the real genius behind Battlestar Galactica is this voting mechanism and how the skill cards are used. Most things in the game require what is called a skill check. And Each turn brings a crisis card, that's the bad card, with various tasks that the players must overcome. To accomplish these different things in the game, players need to play matching skill cards to fend off the problems. Skill cards that don't match hinder the player's success. Players can talk about what kind of cards they intend to contribute to the group that will help the group succeed, but none of that is a binding contract. You can play whatever card you want when it comes time because you might be part of the Cylon. You don't want to help the group.
Right.
And you're not allowed to actually reveal the exact strength of the cards. You can't say, well, I have about 4 strength, that'll help. You just say, I have some red cards that can help.
Okay.
Cards that are added to the pile are shuffled and then revealed to see if the group was successful or not. Because 2 random cards are added to each attempt, represents fate in the game, you can never be entirely certain who is working against the group or even how many people are on your own side.
Wow.
Because both of the fate cards could be unmatching cards that don't help you succeed. And now you're pointing at, oh, well,
yeah,
Matt must be one of the traitors because there were so many of those bad cards in there. But it could have been the fate cards.
Could you also have 2 good cards and make it look like a Cylon is actually a good person?
Yeah, exactly. The fate cards could help the person who's a Cylon, kind of keep themselves covered a little bit. And one of the strategies that the Cylon might do is play matching cards early in the game so that, we pass all the missions easy at the beginning so that there's no one to blame.
Lull us into a false sense of security.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden you start throwing in Descent and all these cards that make it harder and harder as the game goes on. Each location in Galactica provides a unique abilities that players can use. And the player who is president can travel to Colonial 1, another ship providing more unique benefits for that person only. The player who is president can perform actions that help build morale, while the admiral can help the ship's ability to attack the Cylon ships. At a certain time in the game, players get a second secret role card that might change from the one they received at the beginning of the game. So you might have started as a trustworthy human working hard to help the group, building the group's trust, but now you've discovered that you are a sleeper cell Cylon or a Cylon sympathizer all along, and now your goals have changed so that you can only win if the Cylons win the game.
Nice.
Players that are Cylons usually want to keep their identity secret for as long as possible, as they can usually do more damage by quietly sabotaging the group's skill checks and depleting their resources. However, at some point in the game, it may become advantageous for the Cylon player or players to reveal themselves so that they can take advantage of the powerful abilities on the Cylon Resurrection ship. Human players win the game only if they travel a specific distance represented by a sort of time track that jumps the fleet. They have to do this without depleting any of the fleet's resources of food, fuel, population, or morale. The Cylon players win the game by preventing the humans from reaching their objective. They do this by destroying Galactica or successfully invading Galactica with Cylon boarding parties.
That's awesome.
There's a lot to do in this game. There's a lot of rules and a lot of moving parts. This has been sort of a general overview.
Yeah.
Because we could probably talk for another 3 or 4 hours about how much I love this game and all the things that you can do in it. It's a fantastic game.
Sure. How long does it take to teach a new player to get them ready?
I would say you're looking at least 45 minutes to an hour to kind of go through all the different things that you can do in the game.
Yeah.
The base game, it might be 45 minutes. If you add in one expansion or two, it could go over an hour to just for the teach.
Yeah.
Plan for a really long game because it's a really long game on its own. We play this game about once a year, sometimes once every 2 years. So there's a big gap in between. We usually play it with people who are fairly familiar with it, with only 1 or 2 people who might be new. And we've never played it for less than 4.5 hours. Like it's always a good 5 hours there.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's, like I said, with people who are familiar with the game. So that's something to keep in mind. Someone who's new, you could easily go to, a 6 or 7 hour game.
It's one of these event games where you plan a whole evening around it.
Yeah. It's an experience.
Yeah.
Fans of the show will find there's a lot of quotes that get flown around the table. There's impersonations that get used,
Nice.
Throw them out the fracking airlock and that kind of thing. And there's tons and tons of accusations in this game. And that's people just saying, like all cooperative games, there's a lot of talking and planning about what should happen.
Yeah.
But in this game, it sort of ends up being, well, I think we should do this and then do this. And someone will invariably say, well, that's just what a Cylon would say, isn't it? Oh, yeah, that's what the Cylon wants us to do. Of course, that's what he wants us to do. It's easy in this game to appear to be the traitor, even though you're not.
Yeah.
You could be like, well, I think we should sacrifice one of the fleet ships because otherwise we're going to lose, morale or this or that. And someone at the table will go, well, wait a minute. They want to sacrifice one. You must be the traitor.
No.
And it's like, no, we have 3 possible bad options. Let's choose the least painful one.
That's right.
I'm not the traitor, really. And once you're suspected of being the traitor, it's hard to lose that too. There's also this, because we do play it with the same group, there's this sort of metagame thing that happens. So if someone has ended up being the traitor a lot, like Sherry or a friend of mine, Justin, you've been the traitor several times in the past, the game usually starts off with, well, we all know that Sherry's going to be the Cylon because she's always the Cylon. And that person has to start off the game sort of convincing the group, no, I'm not. And then they end up
with a handicap.
Exactly. I think that Battlestar is still the best traitor hidden role game. It's definitely that for a lot of people. One of the detractors, obviously, for me is the length of time.
Yeah.
It's not often that we get to sit down with a group and play a 4.5, 5 hour game. So, we don't play it very often. I think if it played in a couple of hours, it easily would be my favorite game.
Wow.
One of the best memories I have about Battlestar Galactica is my friend Justin. He had played just the perfect game. He had completely convinced almost everyone at the table, including myself, that he was one of the survivors of the human race, that he was not a Cylon. And I was not a Cylon. And he was sitting beside me and I was like, yeah, Justin and I'm sure about me and I'm sure about Justin. Justin's not a Cylon. And when Battlestar was defeated, the Cylons still hadn't revealed themselves. They were still hiding amongst us. So we, one by one reveal, no, I was a human. No, I was a human. Justin reveals his card and he says, I was a Cylon. And he pulls off his sweater to reveal underneath he's got this t-shirt on with this little alien laser gun. And it says, destroy all humans. And he just laughs and giggles. And so he'd worn this shirt under his sweater the entire game, the entire 4.5 hours. Just in the hopes that he would actually become the Cylon. He'd be one of the chosen few that was the Cylon, that he would stay hidden the whole game, which is hard to do, and that they would win for this big reveal moment where he rips the sweater off and he goes, destroy all humans. It was so perfect. It was one of those, and Battlestar is one of those games that, 3 years later, we meet someone who we played with and it's like, do you remember when John was the Cylon and he had us all convinced, or you remember I said that thing and it blew my cover and then I had to reveal I was a Cylon. Like those moments in the game just stick with you so much. Fans of the show, absolutely. This is a must game. You have to at least play it once, even if you, like me, you're not a big fan of games that take 5 hours. This is one you have to make time for. Unfortunately, it's really, really hard to acquire a copy. I guess it's out of print.
Yeah. Fantasy Flight lost the rights for Battlestar Galactica, so they rethemed it.
To what? I didn't know that.
Unfathomable, which is a difficult to pronounce nautical-themed version. Traders in Terror. Immerse yourself among the passengers and crews of the SS Atlantica.
And this would be another example where the theme of the game does matter and is important. It's not essential, but when someone says to me, do you want to play a game that takes place in the Battlestar Galactica world or on a boat and it's called Unfathomable? I think you know my answer.
The Adventurers, the Temple of Chac. The Adventurers, the Temple of Chac is an adventure exploration dice rolling action points game for 2 to 6 players, ages 10 and up, that plays in about an hour. The Temple of Chac was designed by Guillaume Blossier and Frédéric Henry and was published by AEG in 2009. When I first heard the term dungeon crawl, I imagined Indiana Jones on his belly, ducking under a giant swinging blade and flying poison-tipped darts. I pictured him dragging a giant burlap sack that's clinking and clanking with treasure as he makes his way through a dimly lit cavern. It turns out that's not at all what a dungeon crawler is.
No. No, that's not a dungeon crawler.
But that's a pretty accurate description of the Adventurers' Temple of Chac. In the Adventurers, players are exploring and looting a booby-trapped temple. They choose a character and place them in the start position, and they have to make their way through the temple, collecting treasure, avoiding traps, defeating challenges, and gathering information that will help them safely navigate other portions of the temple further down. Players need to have the most treasure to win the game, but they have to escape the temple alive first.
Yeah.
Each player's character has what is called a load level. Their load level will go up and down depending on how many treasure cards they are carrying. For example, at the beginning, when you aren't carrying any treasure at all, your load level might be 2. And on your turn, you roll 5 dice. And for every die that is your load level or higher, you get to take 1 action. So if you roll 5 dice, and your load level is 2, and you roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get to take 4 actions.
I always love the load level system that they created for the Adventures games, and I'm always surprised. I've not seen it in any other game, and I'm always surprised that it hasn't shown up in another game or something similar in another game. I think that the idea that you move slower when the more things you have and the less actions you can take, the more things you're carrying, it was done quite brilliantly in this game.
Yeah, it's very thematic.
Yeah.
Actions are things like move 1 square forward, or pick up 1 treasure, or try to acquire a treasure, or look at a tile that might give you some information. So players take turns and move around the board this way, and it's a constant tug of war between moving forward and collecting treasure. Do you risk taking a minute to look at this, or do you sprint through the dangerous part and try to get ahead? These are fun decisions that feel very thematic. The temple itself twists and turns around the board, and there's different stations that you go through, each one offering different threats and different rewards. And each one is awesome.
It's true. The first room has 2 walls that are closing in on each other. So players...
That whole classic thing, right? It's like from the movie.
Yeah, it's literally been done in every movie and TV show that has this adventure theme. The walls are closing in, but yet players have to decide, do they take a moment and look at the hieroglyphics in that room to help them later on in the game avoid other traps.
That's right. While there are treasures you can find in this room, it doesn't make sense to start picking up treasures this early on because it's going to slow you down. But these hieroglyphics have information that could help you out. So that's another sort of tug and pull. And just stay a little longer and get a little bit more information. Meanwhile, these doors are like chug, 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 chug. It's like coming closer. They are moved with a random deck of cards. You flip over a card and it tells you, right, this wall moves in. Sometimes the walls will move apart a little bit, but then they'll come together. They could lunge forward and squish you. If you get squished,
you're out.
Between these walls, you die. You're done.
You're out. Yeah, you're done. So if you do die, if your character does die in this part or in any part of the game, you have 2 characters. One is kind of in reserve, who will come in later on at a sort of midway point in the game.
Yeah.
So that it's not completely player elimination, or at least only if you die once. If you die twice, then it's player elimination.
You will lose the treasures you've acquired up to that point, too.
That's right.
Yeah. And if you don't die, the next is the lava pit. You can take the long way around, or you can jump across the lava pit from runestone to runestone, a shortcut. But there's a very real possibility that one of those stones might fall into the pit, and you die.
Yeah. And this is where the hieroglyphics that you took time while the walls were closing in earlier, if you memorized which ones, you know which ones are safe for you to travel on and which ones are traps. You can actually look for treasure in the lava pit, just like you could in all the rooms. It's also acceptable for you to take the long way around. You can go around the lava pit altogether, and there are some alcoves there with some treasure cards that you can spend extra actions to get into those and get some more treasure.
Yeah. After the lava pit is the river, which is a sort of crossroads part. There's multiple paths that you can take at this point. You can jump into the river, you can walk across the rickety bridge, or you can take the safe but long way around.
The river has this waterfall at the end that, you have to roll some dice. And if you don't traverse it successfully, you're literally going to fall over the waterfall and die. There is a way to sort of manage the risk and lower your load level. And you actually even get a second chance, but you have to lose some items.
Right.
But it's this extra little danger in this game. Like, you've avoided the squishing, you've gone through the lava pit, and now you've got this waterfall that you have to deal with.
The rickety bridge, which is the other option, could collapse as you cross it. But if you're like the first or second player to cross it, it should be pretty safe. It gets more and more rickety as more players cross it.
You can actually take a turn, like take an action to
jump up and down,
try and destroy some of the jump up and down on this rickety old bridge to destroy some planks to make it harder for the other adventurers who are behind you.
Yeah.
Which I think is wonderful, forcing them to either take the risk of the rickety bridge, which is now more rickety, or jump in the water and risk the waterfall.
You literally roll a die and remove planks of wood from the bridge. It's this little bridge that spans the river area, and you literally remove planks of wood from it. They click in. And it's just so thematic.
Yeah.
That looks pretty safe now. And then you remove a couple of pieces. I don't know if I want to cross that. That doesn't look safe at all.
I might have to go around the long way.
That's right.
The components are fantastic. These plastic little planks of wood that go across the bridge. It's great.
So the river and the rickety bridge sound pretty crappy, so why wouldn't you just take the long way around? Well, in addition to these rooms and traps, there's also an Indiana Jones-style boulder that is making its way through the temple, chasing you, possibly squishing you, and then ultimately sealing the exit of the temple, trapping you inside.
The boulder is rolling down the hallways for everyone who took the long route around, the safe route, is running the risk of being squished by this boulder that's picking up speed and momentum, and it's going towards the end of the only exit in the temple. And it acts as kind of like a timer mechanism, right? Because everyone who's going to get out has to get out before the boulder hits that gate at the end and seals everyone inside, and anyone trapped inside is...
The game is instantly over. It is tremendously thematic,
And it doesn't matter if you've collected the most treasure.
Yeah.
If you're trapped inside, you're still dead. You got stuck in the Temple of Chac.
There's a bit of overhead when it comes to teaching this game because each of the rooms and each of the traps work differently. And the players need to know how many actions it's going to take to do certain activities so they can properly gauge their risk and reward. But having said that, there's still enough theme and action in this game that just pops through on the very first play.
And most of the people I've played it with are always like, let's play that again.
Yeah.
It's a really, really fun game. And the second play is always much faster because everyone's sort of got the concept and the whole idea of the load level. And, you can at any time drop some of your treasures. They're gone forever, but you've reduced your load level, allowing you more actions or the potential for more actions on your turn, which I always thought was another way that sort of load level system really, really works really well.
It's tremendously thematic. The boulder is barreling down on you. It's right behind you. You need to go faster. You drop a few things.
Yeah.
You're lighter now. It works.
And that part is literally right out of, the Indiana Jones movie, the first one. I mean, and it just feels so great.
Yeah.
Running and seeing this boulder, and you have to make that noise when it moves down the hall, like the noise as it's rolling towards you. It's like, oh no, run. Nemesis. Nemesis is an epic science fiction, somewhat cooperative hidden role game about surviving an alien-infested spaceship. Published in 2018 by Awaken Realms and designed by Adam Kwapensky, Nemesis can be played with 1 to 5 players ages 12 and up in about 2 to 3 hours. In Nemesis, players wake up from cryosleep to find that we are all experiencing hazy memory. No one can remember the specifics of how the ship is laid out, and even worse, parts of the ship have malfunctioned. In the room where players awaken is the body of one of their crewmates. The body has a large hole in its chest, and it's unclear how they died. To have a chance to win, players must accomplish their hidden mission goal that was assigned to them at the beginning of the game. With Nemesis, players are given 2 cards with possibly different or opposing goals on them, and as the game progresses, must choose to discard one of those cards. Other players may work with you in the game, but beware. Everyone has their own agenda and may turn on you at any moment.
This is such a great element. Each player gets a corporate objective and a personal objective. And the personal objective is quite often more focused on cooperative play and can be a bit more friendly to other players at the table, whereas the corporate objective might have even a betrayal element in there or some sort of conflict where you have to wreck other people's plans. And so,
or destroy the ship or blow it up or
all sorts of, right? Yeah. And so I love how that will allow the players at the table to decide what kind of game we're going to be playing.
Yeah. Yeah. We've seen that sort of, everyone has a secret objective in this game. We've seen that a lot in other games.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I love the way you get 2 and you can choose mid-game which one you want to work on.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? I was playing really friendly. I was going to do the personal objective. But all of a sudden, it seems easier to, kill player 3, so I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to, the engines are already damaged, so I won't tell anyone, and hopefully the ship will just blow up and I'll get out in an escape pod.
Yeah. You get a few rounds where you get to feel it out and maybe figure out which of these 2 objectives might be easier to complete.
Yeah. It gives players a lot more option. So beyond just surviving to the end of the game and meeting your goal and objective, players will probably need to work together to have a chance at victory. Mm-hmm. Players have to make sure that the ship survives and doesn't malfunction or explode due to too many fires inside the ship, or that the self-destruct sequence hasn't been activated. They also have to make sure that the engines are functioning and that the ship is headed in the right direction. But worst of all is the possibility of an alien infection that you might have picked up from fighting or being attacked by the aliens that are on the ship. And other players can have objectives that are the complete opposite of all of these examples.
Yeah. This is a new spin on the semi-cooperative game because it's not hidden traitor so much. I mean, everybody has different goals and they could all align. They could be all the same thing. We could all be going, let's take it back to Earth. Let's get, and it all really depends. It's a really interesting twist on what was a familiar mechanism that we've seen before.
It can be this really cooperative experience, or it can be this really competitive experience where literally, you're setting rooms on fire and running away, or locking your fellow players in rooms with aliens. Everyone's really in it for themselves. Some examples of the goals might be to damage the ship's engines and escape an escape pod. It might just say escape an escape pod with an alien egg. Mm-hmm. It might be to blow up the ship or make sure that a specific player dies before the end of the game. Or maybe everyone has to die except for you. Maybe you have to send the ship to another location other than Earth. Nemesis is also very much a sandbox game in that players can make up their own minds about where they go on the ship and the kinds of things that they want to do. Besides the goals, the actions can be varied. There's a lot of things that people can do.
Yeah. As you explore the ship, you're turning over those tiles and revealing what each room is. Each room has a different action you can perform in it. Like you're mentioning putting fires out. There's a fire control room. If you go in there, then you can remotely activate the fire suppression systems in other parts of the ship.
Yeah.
Or you need to send the signal as one of your objectives. Well, there's the signal room. Well, you have to find that signal room. You have to explore the signal room and find that and then activate that ability.
Yeah, you might need to go to examine the ship's engine or to repair them or even sabotage them. You can head to the bridge and make sure that the ship is headed to the right destination, or make sure that other players haven't already changed the destination, or change it yourself so that now we're heading to deep space or Mars or somewhere else. There are alien eggs to steal. You can steal them and study them in the lab. You can research the aliens to find their weak spot, making them easier to kill and easier for you to accomplish some of your objectives. You can spend time repairing the ship and the computer systems.
Items you find can be crafted into weapons, or you could spend the whole game just killing aliens.
The ship is modular, so every game was going to play very differently than the last time. And some of the rooms may not be in this particular game that you're expecting to see. It's important to mention here that there is player elimination in this game. It's quite possible that your player could be killed, or you got out and escaped in an escape pod while the game continues to be played by the other players. And I know that a lot of people don't like that, myself included usually. But with Nemesis, it feels like it works somehow. It adds this element of tension and urgency to the game that you literally can die and be out of the game, for the last half of it or whatever. It seems to work so well.
I find the game is exciting enough just to watch. There's enough going on just to root for your teammates or people around the table to succeed.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching a movie. There's a story that's playing out.
It really is. Every game has this tense cinematic feel to it. I'm yet to experience a game of Nemesis that doesn't have this big climactic ending at the end, like a movie. And, if you miss the last couple rounds because your character died or it's escaped into the escape pod, it's not that bad. It's fun to watch other players trying to accomplish it. And, thankfully, there's still enough things to do. Like there is quite a bit of upkeep in the game in between turns. So you can take the role of the aliens and, roll the dice for them in combat. And you still get to participate in some ways.
Reach into the bag and pull out the new tokens and all that stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
No, for sure.
Yeah, there's still things to keep you engaged in the game. And that might be part of why it works so well, too.
I have not been eliminated in any game of Nemesis, but I wouldn't get up from the table and leave. I would want to see how it played out.
I have been eliminated and I have gotten up, but only to go get a drink or use a bathroom break and then run back to the table to see what's happening. What did I miss? What did I miss?
And have a little cry.
Yeah, exactly. Have a little cry in the washroom because I was so close. And if I'd only just gone in the other room. Nemesis includes rules for a fully cooperative game. And I think that's important to note because that's not what we were talking about early.
Yeah.
It is a semi-cooperative game normally, but there are rules that you can play where it's fully cooperative. And they even have rules for a solo version and a one versus many game where one player takes on the role of the aliens and all they're trying to do is stop the group. I haven't actually tried any of those options, but for me, I don't know if that would work as well. I think that the part of the game that I love so much is not being able to trust the motivations of the other players. And that becomes such an integral part of the game. And I'm not sure I would enjoy it as a fully cooperative or a one versus many game. But I think it's one I'll probably try maybe after I've played Nemesis way more times than I currently have. The game feels very much like you've been set down at the beginning of a new movie in the Alien franchise. Mm-hmm. But it's not really a game in the Alien franchise. In fact, the aliens aren't called aliens. They're called intruders. That's the name that the ship's artificial intelligence has come up for them. But the miniatures for these aliens, they look a lot like the aliens from the Alien movies, and they do a lot of the same kinds of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rules in this game as well. It's a big game with lots of moving parts. I've seen people call it fiddly. It's not a phrase that I particularly like, but I understand how it applies in this situation. An example of that is kind of like what we talked about in Battlestar and in Temples of Chac. Each room has a number of items in them, and they have their own special action that you can do in that room. So there's a bit of learning as you play the game for the first time. Each player has their own individual tools and weapons that they can use or craft, as well as a unique deck with special abilities that only they can use. Every turn has players drawing from an event deck to decide how the aliens move and attack. It's probably not a game that you want to introduce to someone who is, very new to modern games. And, it's like someone who's only ever played Ticket to Ride or something. It requires the right group that are interested in the theme, and then we'll sit down and learn all the rules and play for a few hours. Luck does play a fairly big part in this game. Would you agree? I think so.
I think so too, but I think that fits the theme. It allows for a random elements. You don't know what the threat's going to be or how soon the threat is going to progress. I played a game where the aliens progressed very slowly, and it was a lot of us trying to complete our missions, and there wasn't a whole lot of aliens happening. The bag itself was building and getting more dangerous. We knew that the potential for aliens was increasing, but they just never came out for such a long time. And then boom, at the end, they come rushing out at you, and they're way too powerful at that point. And it was, they're everywhere. But it makes for a different, each game is then a different experience.
Yeah, in some ways that randomness adds to the replayability. Like things like how the aliens appear, that's often decided with a dice roll. Whether they move, it's decided with the flip of a card. Tokens are drawn from a bag. Combat involves dice. Like there's a lot of things in there that involve luck, but it adds to the replayability of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works. It's a game that I feel like you should be prepared to lose more often than you win.
Yeah.
But that's okay for me. It works. It's such a cinematic experience game that, I mean, I don't normally care about winning a game anyway, but, if you're going to play 2 hours, I understand some people want to have a chance to win.
Sure.
And this game might be a game where you just, the luck of the draw and you never really had a real chance. But the game itself is that experience. That's what we're all here to watch.
Agreed.
And sometimes it's your character and sometimes it's Matt's character that's, got this incredible character arc and these dramatic things happen. And we're all just sitting on the edge of our seat watching as your character goes through this.
Yeah, you're egging them on, you're cheering them on. Sometimes you're the hero in the movie and sometimes the movie's a tragedy.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes you're the villain and you make all the bad decisions and everybody hates you and they're cheering against you. And that's awesome too. That's fun. Like every game is completely different. And that's, the nature of how this is a sandbox game.
Yeah.
I think this is actually the best of the sandbox games.
Wow.
I haven't played that many, but I personally feel like this one does it the best. It really feels like there's parts of this game that we've never touched. Like we've played it several times and,
yeah.
I think we researched the alien once of the 3 or 4 different ways that we could. And it's like, we could play a whole game just doing that,
Yeah.
The game definitely takes up a lot of table space. It's huge.
It is huge.
There's tons of decks of cards. The miniatures, we should say, they're beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. They could have done with tokens. They could have made them very simple poses, but each size of alien comes in several poses.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a little standy up one. I've got one that's crouching. I've got one that's got his arm out.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to do that, but it's great that they did.
And they are fantastic looking. Like they just scream out for a paint job.
Yeah.
Every game I played has that very cinematic feel. The end is, this really dramatic, usually in the last round or second last round, this very dramatic moment. And when it's over, I find everyone feels physically tired. Like you actually are tired after playing this.
The adrenaline leaves and you're just left. Yeah.
Some of that's because it was a long game. You sat around the table for 2.5 hours, but Mostly it's this emotional toll.
Yeah. Tense.
Yeah, this tense running through the ship, running away from aliens and fighting them. And oh no, I rolled badly. Oh, I think I'm dead. No, I'm still alive. I can still do it. I can still do it. And then you didn't. Or you did. And we've always ended up after the game talking about the game for days.
Yeah, it tells a story and you want to retell that story. And this most amazing thing happened.
And you see your friend a week later and they're like, wasn't that so cool? I was the captain and I was on the bridge and the whole thing blew up. It was amazing. That always happens. It's this unexpected ending that is memorable and really hits home. And I think it is among the best of the thematic games for sure. It's one of the games that we'll talk about for a long, long time afterwards.
Have you played any of the games that we've talked about in this episode? What's your favorite thematic game? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape Into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Escape Into Board Games.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yassoot and Daniel Carlton. See you at the next Escape.